Welcome to Tai Chi Masterpiece Theater. My name is Scott Park Phillips, and I'm going to be talking today about the concept of Jin. Jin as in, usually translated as power through the body. There are many different types of Jin. To initiate this conversation, I'm going to begin by looking at the Tai Chi Classics. There are 5 Tai Chi Classics. This is the best translation, Louis Swaim's translation. There are many others, but he has the Chinese, and he goes over each term. It's, in the internet era, we could actually do better because you could have a dictionary ready at hand for each character. But this is pretty good. So, the Tai Chi Classics, at least the first few, are attributed to Zhang Sanfeng, the immortal. And this has a really specific meaning. It means that they were written as a spirit writing game, which was a type of religious expression, a very common type of religious expression in the 1800s, worldwide actually, but particularly in China. And certainly, 1700s, 1800s, both. Zhang Sanfeng, along with Wang Zhongyue, who is Garuda, by the way, were names given to spirit writing texts, or the credited authors of spirit written texts, which were written by groups of people all sitting around a table, often at a sexual recreation center, but sometimes at someone's house, and contributing stuff. And clearly the people who put this together were really knowledgeable about Tai Chi. But giving it the name Zhang Sanfeng has a number of meanings. The first one is utterly indisputable, and that's that the implication that the text is about the Golden Elixir, because he was primarily a teacher of the Golden Elixir. In my book, I also show that he was known for his extraordinary fighting skills as early as the 1590s, probably earlier, which is, I'm the first person to show that using texts. So Zhang Sanfeng is a fighter and is known for teaching the Golden Elixir. And the Golden Elixir, the primary characteristic of the Golden Elixir is reversals, inversions, and flipping things on their head. And this, just as an example, the first person to write authoritatively in English about the Golden Elixir, Isabelle Robinet, titled her book, Flipping the World Upside Down. And so it's really, really fundamental. And so if you have a text written by someone who is known for teaching the Golden Elixir, there's going to be lots of references to that in the text, and in fact there are. And there are also going to be things that you're meant to invert, things that you're meant to flip or reverse. It's not meant to be. Golden Elixir instructions are never straight. You read it and then you reverse it in some way, or you find the error in it. And I knew this back. I knew this in the 90s. In the early 90s, we didn't have Facebook, Instagram, so we did things like memorize the Tai Chi Classics and try to practice each line as like a physical practice, which was fun. And then I was studying Taoism. I spent 10 years studying Orthodox Taoism. And so I became pretty familiar with lots of Chinese texts and how to read them. And so when you read this kind of stuff, there's lots of keys in here. Like, so in the last section of the first classic, it says, what is Tai Chi? It's like a long river or a great ocean flowing smoothly and ceaselessly. So this is, anybody who's familiar with Chinese texts knows that the river is, the Tao is like a river flowing to the sea. So it it's going to the lowest place and seeking that without any resistance. And the ocean metaphor is, in fact, a description of huntun, or totally undifferentiated chaos, or the currents of the ocean moving in 10 directions simultaneously. It's a very specific framing of cosmology from which the world comes into being and then goes out. So it begins in huntun, it differentiates into things, and then they remerge into a whole chaos. And that huntun itself is as close as a human can come to experiencing Tao. And that's what the ocean metaphor is. And you see it visually all the time in the clothing of Chinese opera, for example, or Taoist vestments. Because you're embodying huntun. And obviously that's what Tai Chi is doing, and that's what the text says it's doing. And then the text goes on to explain these concepts of peng, lu, ji, and an, or ward off, roll back, press, push, a bunch of other terms, and gives describes it as the bagua, or the compass, essentially, as each having a direction. So peng is east, and ji is west, and lu is north, and an is south, and you have the other, the cardinal directions, corners, representing different techniques like split and pluck. These terms, this is very clearly, if you understand it in context, it's saying it's like the Tao, so it doesn't go in these directions, it stays in the middle. That's what the text is telling you. It's saying, look, there's these terms define go in a journey, on a journey. The journey we're going to is return to the center. So, and I realized this in the 1990s when I read it. And I was like, wow, this is saying don't do these things. That's really interesting that nobody in the modern era seems to do that. And he seems to know that. So it sent me on this journey. Part of the reason I went on this journey, like, what happened to China that that the average martial arts teacher doesn't know how to even understand a text like this? That was fascinating journey, and my first book is more about that, but the second book also deals with that question. I call it the YMCA consensus. So back in the 90s, I had many people studied with, at least briefly, with a guy named Kumar Francis, who articulated precisely what the body energies of Peng, Ji, Lu, and An were, as specific ways of orienting the body. And he really deserves credit for being the first person to do that. You know, Peng is and Ji and Lu and An are very specific ways of moving the body and responding to force. Then they interlock so that you can do them continuously. So the way I read this for at least 10, maybe 15 years was that you should do all the different types of jin, and you should perfect them, and you should link them together seamlessly, and then there's something in between, something inside. You know, they define the directions away, so you should go back toward the center and do less. Basically, if you can make contact with someone and maybe just improve your position, and their own aggression will rise up and they'll push themselves away. And this is a really elegant way of thinking about, say, push hands. And it's really cool. It works. It works particularly for like teaching people how to be better people. But it doesn't work that well if you have to fight somebody who's 50 pounds heavier than you and more aggressive. And I mean, okay, if they're a goat and you know how, and you've actually worked with goats, I've worked with goats, so I know that you just touch the goat and you move their center. I mean, sure, you can, but it doesn't really work. It doesn't work very well. It's really dependent on you just being a better goat, a smarter goat. And that all Jin is like that. And what happened from practicing the Golden Elixir, 10 years in, I started to really practice the cultivation of emptiness. And I'll do some more videos on how you establish emptiness in your body. But once I started to get emptiness, I started to realize that Jin was just a completely wrong term, and that it's in here as a trick. And in fact, the previous, if you go in the classes, in that same classic, in that first one, it explains the whole thing about a balance or a counterbalance and how it works, and that if someone's practiced for many years and they don't seem to be able to neutralize incoming forces, it's because they don't understand double weighting. It's like, you don't understand it. So it's conceptual. It's a magic trick, basically. You either understand it or you don't. And double weighting, you can get really esoteric in how you describe it, but it's not. It's just you touch someone, if you feel the weight on your foot, like if you feel any pressure on the bottom of your foot, you're double weighted. You've increased your weight, right? And you're also in a goat against goat, force against force situation. So now you're using Jin. So Jin is basically any time you touch someone and you feel your foot. That's Jin. And so, wow, I was like, oh, okay. How do I get rid of that? And that's when I discovered counterbalance power, negative root, all these different kinds, so many different kinds of power. I'd already been working with like, how do you punch someone with complete emptiness? But it failed in certain types of situations. It also failed to convince people, even when I could just hit them in the head. They didn't acknowledge it because I didn't want to just punch them in the head. And so, it's like sort of that you get into that thing like, do they realize that they're completely defenseless? They don't. I wonder what kind of conversation we should have. Anyway, that's the world. As a teacher, you can make it work. But if the person's not your teacher, if they're not your student, or they're your teacher, that's hard. So, but I also did, and it also developed Qi on the back, all sorts of things that just are completely opposite of Jin power. There's no way you can use Jin. Okay, there's one way you can use Jin and counterbalance technique, but it's unconscious. Like, people don't realize they're doing it. And I occasionally see that on the internet. It's really hard to see. I couldn't see it until I understood it. So putting it on video, it's limited value. Because what it looks like is the other person's giving up. So until you feel it, you're just like, well, why did that person just give up? If I just slow motion punch and they crumble, you're like, why did they crumble? You can't see the why of it because it's an illusion. It's a tactile illusion, or it's a balanced perception illusion. And if it just looks like they're giving up. So that's what I wanted to say. I know that that's going to be hard for a lot of people to hear, that Jin is actually the wrong way to go, and that Jin is a mistake. And, I've been doing this Tai Chi for 30 years. It's okay. Spend 10 years on Jin. Then come to me and I'll teach you how to reverse it or undo it. Anyway, thanks for listening. And subscribe if you like this mellow style. Also, please buy my books at Amazon.com or visit me at NorthStarMartialArts.com. Thanks.